All right. So who has a question, a comment, a snide remark, a concern? Let's fire away.
It's all overwhelming to me.
So
It's a
Tom,
lot. It's a
I'd
lot.
ask, you've shared a lot of stories with me about certain things
Sure.
that are occurring, right? And I think that the reality is that a lot of people, this may be the first time we've really had a cybersecurity presentation. Again, it's one of those things that kind of goes under the radar that we don't really think about until it's an issue, right? It's one of those things that it's better to have and not need than need and not have. And so I'm curious if you could maybe share another story, one of the stories you share with me or something that's a real life experience, right? So is there anything that kind of comes to mind?
So I mentioned our newest client, the celebrity, and that resulted from Instagram. I'm also going to use another example because it's fresh and it's real, and it resulted from Instagram on a personal account connected to a device that also had personal activity going on as well as business activity. And this client's a realtor. And what happened was on her Instagram, it was hacked. She had a weak password. She was locked out because she didn't have two-factor authentication on. Her password was changed in a matter of instant. The phone rang and they were on the phone distracting her at the same time, having her enter a code. And she's not thinking about it because here's the thing. I don't want anybody to ever feel stupid. You probably had something happen to you before, but if something ever does happen, don't feel stupid. Just raise your hand and ask, because that's a common thing. Oh my God, I feel stupid. How did I fall for this? It's so easy because they trick you. And what they did in this particular incident was they went through, and it resulted from her personal trainer came to her. But what they were doing is reading the messages going back and forth between her and her personal trainer, and got some insight on how to attack her and trick her. And the thing is they put a recovery, they entered in the recovery on Instagram's page, and a code pops up, and they sent it to her. And when she was on the phone, and this was occurring online, they tricked her into giving that code to them so they can then lock her out. It was that easy. So then what happened? She's locked out. They sent it to her 1,500 followers. One of those followers was a client of hers. So she's a realtor. Client, a doctor, a medical doctor. She's a pediatrician who's also a client now because of this. And what happened was the doctor clicked on it, and it was a completely different scenario. So again, they were reading these messages. The doctor and the realtor were talking about, she's got, her father's sick, her father's in the hospital, she's upstate New York, the family is, and she's got to travel back and forth on a train. And so she's looking for a car. And what they did was they put a picture of a car on the realtor's Instagram page, and the same trick. Enter this code, locked her out. No two-factor authentication on, weak password, yada, yada, yada. That's how it happens. In this case, in the doctor's case, she sent $5,000 because they tricked her into investing, and she would get a good return on Bitcoin, and she would be able to get this new Mercedes. Well, what's happening in the world right now? Nobody can get a car, right? And the dealers are marking these cars up, and it's ridiculous. There's a chip shortage. So they lured her in with almost a brand new Mercedes. Hey, you can get this, but if you invest $5,000, I can grow that into 10, 20 in a short amount of time. And then you can have this car for damn near $5,000. And because of what's going on, her father's in the hospital, she's concerned, this and that, and the other. Oh, yes. Okay, great. And then when she did it, she's like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. And so by that time, it was too late. We were able to recover half of that money for her. Surprisingly, I even shocked myself because once that leaves, it's very, very difficult to recover some of that money. And so I tell that story because not only is it just 2 weeks ago, but it gives you an idea of how these things happen, and the blend between personal activity and work activity, right? We have a medical doctor, and God forbid that was her work computer. Thank God there was no, medical data or patient data on her personal computer, but it could have. A lot of people do that. But the realtor, she had business and work, personal and work data on her and activities on her PC, and it breached one of her clients. And then I got the company, the real estate company involved, and I got somebody who didn't understand cybersecurity. And she's like, well, I don't really understand why we would be liable. I said, do me a favor, go ask the same question with one of your attorneys. I'm guarantee you they're going to give you a different response. You are liable because you're allowing your realtors to use their personal devices that aren't protected. And we now see why, because it affected one of your clients and she's not happy right now. And so that goes into reputation, legal liability. So I hope you're all seeing the connection here, the tangled web, the cyber world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're about to get a couple questions in a second here, but I've got one directly for you, Tom. So when we look at the social world, and as we all know, with the pandemic and everything occurring, there's been a massive shift into the virtual world. So we see Facebook being the #1 platform on a personal level. We see LinkedIn being the #1 platform on a business level. Just focusing on those two, on Facebook and LinkedIn, I'm curious if there are any things that you would advise people to avoid. You know, for instance, we've had a lot of conversations about LinkedIn, building your network, building up your followers, etc. And so sometimes when you get to a certain point, I feel like you're going to get a lot of spam emails, right? I get messages all the time from people I've never met, never seen, never talked to. I probably get like 5 of those a day. Some of those are people in other, I'll tell you this one. I had this lady reach out to me the other day and she was like, hey, we can help you do XYZ. Let's schedule an appointment. And I was like, I just want to look at what's going on. Let me just see what's going on. Do you know what times she had available for appointments? Between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. And I was like, you may be in a different time zone and I get that, but you're trying to get my business and you want me to jump on, and her suggestion was 3 a.m. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not jumping on a meeting with you at 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm just not. Okay. So I'm curious to pull all this back together and rope it into a concise question. What would you advise people to look for either on one of those two fronts? You know, are there things that we should avoid? Could you dive into that a little bit for us?
Good question. So let me share my screen again, because some of this are actually on my tip sheet, and I would encourage everybody to have a look at that. So I'll talk about this. Some of the, so great question. And we need to be careful about who we're speaking with online and what kind of information we're relaying. I don't know if that would be a direct red flag for me. I think I would first think that person has no awareness, right? So I get hit up all the time by messages on LinkedIn for rep fitness. Now, I mean, that just goes to show me that this person who's contacting me hasn't bothered to look to see what I do. I mean, it's very clear what I do on LinkedIn, so I don't know why you would message me about a fitness company, but that's just somebody not paying attention, right? So to take it to the next step, to do your due diligence, right? It's checking a legitimate link and what that company is connected to. And I'm not suggesting to click on anything that they send you that might be mysterious, right? But to do your own due diligence and do a Google search on that company, look at the ratings, look on LinkedIn, see who they're connected with, what they do, pull up the company's page. You know, more often than not, lower, you know, consultants and things like that, they aren't going to be identified with the company, but you know, you can perform your due diligence and see legitimacy, and then giving them a call, right? Or setting up a brief conversation over Zoom to ask some more questions. Now, there are many different ways that you can obtain information, right? And the thing you have to be careful about with Facebook and even LinkedIn is malicious links coming through. And if you don't have the right protections on your computer to identify these malicious links and block them before you click on them, you might be in trouble. For example, this happened to me over the weekend. I was scrolling through Facebook and I stopped on an ad. It was a video, and I was interested, and I clicked on it because you can't really see links on Facebook, right? And my mobile security blocked the site. And then I performed some due diligence by searching on this link, and sure enough, it's a malicious link. And now I started reading all the comments on this, and then, I'm sort of wondering to myself, well, how many are bots? Are you engaging with a bot online? I tell my friends all the time, I'll see them on, having political discussions online. And I said, I will tell you, don't do that, because I have a prospect that I'm working on with a startup. He had a political disagreement online. Someone told that particular individual told him, I'm going to hack you. He didn't believe them. And 10 minutes later, after that conversation, he was hacked. Now that was his personal email. And then it bled into his business, and his business was affected. And so that's another example of how quickly that can happen. But putting your name out there, and I encourage people to have a voice, but I encourage people to do their due diligence and do it safely. If you're going to be doing those types of activities online, and putting yourself at risk, make sure you have the right protections in place, just in case somebody sends you a malicious link, just in case you click on something that you shouldn't. So you don't want to compromise your environment. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, that was great perspective. And the due diligence comes in, and I really like what you said there at the end, because we get so caught up in the political side of things, and we want to voice our opinion. Everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
But the reality is that, again, I was reading this morning, and the thing that really stands out to me about this is that our opinion is simply our own emotional interpretation on a past event. What that boils down to is that whatever the truth is that we hold in our mind, it's simply that. It's just our truth. That doesn't make it a fact. It doesn't make it the real scenario. I think the example that I really liked was that, and I'm not looking to deviate, but the example I really like is simple. Let's say you walk into a coffee store, and we're just going to say this guy's name is Tim. And there's this individual, Tim, and he goes to order his coffee, and he's holding his coffee, and he goes to look up, and some guy kind of walks by and bumps his elbow, and now Tim spills coffee all over himself. Well, Tim was actually walking to an interview, and so he's all dressed up, and he's got this coffee all over him, and he turns to the guy, and Tim's like, come on, really, man? And now he's got coffee covered in him. And because of his emotional interpretation, oh, I look funny, I don't look professional, he doesn't even go to the interview. And so now he blames not going to the interview on this individual. Now, meanwhile, if we were to switch that perspective, and let's say we were another person in a corner of that coffee shop, and we saw the whole thing happen, we might have seen something completely different. We see Tim's not paying attention. We see this young individual is walking by, trips, bumps into Tim, and is so embarrassed that instead of a proper apology, he runs out of the store. And so the point is that when we get into these debates online, if it's Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, if it has to do with politics, we're never going to win that debate unless somebody sees it the exact same way as us. So what is the point in getting on social media and arguing against somebody else? It does no good. You're not going to win. Okay. So I do really like the example that you shared there, Tom. I think it's extremely relevant. Go ahead. I can tell you want to say something.
I would add something, and this is no judgment. I don't care what side of aisle you are, but there's a new app coming out where President Trump, I don't know what it's called, but there are risks with that and say Parler. And it's not to discourage anybody from joining, but they have security and privacy risks, significant. They've been analyzed by security experts. And so I would err on caution with those particular apps because of the divisiveness, but any application. So not just that, but any game that you download, any application, even if it's from the App Store. And here's what you need to look for. You need to look for the country of origin, because that's incredibly important, right? What countries, you think of it in a geopolitical perspective, what countries actually protect data and what countries use that data against you. Number two, what they're doing with your data, how they're protecting it. Are they protecting it in transit, and are they storing it under lock and key, meaning encrypting it? Number three, are they sharing your data? So when you sign up with your name, any private information, photos, all your conversations, is that staying within the application, or is that being shared to advertisers? Who is it being shared with? Those are incredibly important points. And you could pull up the terms and conditions and privacy policies. I mean, they're written for a lawyer by a lawyer, but you can scroll through and sort of identify those particular areas, and it will allow you to make that risk assessment on whether you should be using the application. I would strongly encourage everybody to do that before they download an app, because we just saw a few weeks ago, there were malicious apps that were moved from both Apple and Google Play Store. They find themselves on there because look, Apple and Google are not doing any sort of security analysis on the applications that pop on their stores. So it's up to you to protect yourselves before you download.
Absolutely. Look, I want to shift gears a little bit. Matt, I'm curious what Mr. Binary Bunny, what are some of your thoughts on this? Because Matt is immersed in the tech world, and I know that you kind of slightly mentioned that, Tom, but I'm curious, Matt, do you have any thoughts or questions or experiences or stories that you think are applicable to this conversation on cybersecurity?
Oh God, yes. I mean, I could sit there and talk longer than Tom on this. So, let me share you a funny story. This is not like haha. This is like, oh my God, ha. So, these bastards here, and I'll show you this now. These bastards here are angry. And you know why? Rovio, who makes this for both Android and Apple and iOS, they are one of the worst offenders of sharing your information with other third parties. And you wonder why the birds are angry. Now you know why. So I cringe when I hear Tom. We actually had a small one-on-one on Zoom, so I thank Keegan for his kindness and his thoughtfulness in hooking us up. I had a field day talking to him. So, but even last night, I had a guy who was a client who has Facebook compromised. And he went into a browser that he installed. It wasn't secure. It didn't have the Matt touch. He was talking to somebody he didn't know that well. He gave up his information, and they locked him out of his Facebook. Thankfully, they didn't delete it, but he can't get in with his email. He can't get in with his phone number, and so I got him onto another company to help him recover his Facebook. And so the one thing that I'll mention to you is I deal with a lot of elderly clients, and they are extremely vulnerable to what's out there because they don't know any better, and more importantly, they're dangerous enough to try things themselves. And that opens up Pandora's box right there. And so I can't tell you how many people I've had to help with the fake scams where Microsoft is calling or Apple is calling and they want to charge you X amount of dollars, and people go on, charge your credit card, you have identity theft, and then these bastards go on to their machines and they compromise their machines. And so I have to clean up the damage, and it is a complete shit show. And so I feel for all these people because I've been there before. When Tom tells you stories, he's not full of shit. He really is 100. He's keeping it 100, as they say. So you don't know what's out there, and you don't know what can hurt you. And it is a problem. And you have to be proactive. You have to be like Black Sabbath. You got to be paranoid. And, you can also throw in some Jewish guilt in there, too. So you have to sit there and you have to think, okay, who's going to come after me? How secure am I? I mean, you just can't have Bill Gates protecting you. You got to have Arnold, and not like, I am the governor, Arnold. You want 1987 Predator, come with me if you want to live. That's the Arnold that you want protecting you.
Absolutely right. Matt, you're on point, and I love the Angry Birds analogy. I'm a huge fan of analogy, right? This stuff is complex because you gotta translate it for folks and make it realistic. But the common thing is, a little more context to that startup. is that business owner was arguing with me on the phone. And I said, sir, I said, you called me so I could help you. I said, who's the expert here? I said, if you want to look, I'm here to help you. I just gave you the strategy, whether you hire me or whether you hire someone else. I literally gave him the strategy, and he was arguing with the strategy. And I said, but this is how it happened for you. And more context is he's got 20 consultants that work overseas that are probably stealing all his intellectual property that have access to it. I said, there's no reason why a consultant who's working on your website should have access to your intellectual property. They should have a project brief for the website that they're building, and that's it. And the problem is that you're giving access to everybody into your network, and they're overseas where you can't necessarily have any legal recourse. And that was the whole point of the conversation. I want to go sue them. I want you to find out who's stealing data. I said, that's chasing a ghost. But what I can do is lock your stuff down and make sure this doesn't happen again. Because, and the reason is, it's very hard to find somebody who has a VPN for a VPN for a VPN. They could be sitting right next to you, but the VPN could be indicating that they're across the globe. And you're like, wait, somebody in Russia right now is stealing my data. Nope, they're actually sitting right next to you because they have a VPN that's rerouting the traffic all over the globe. And that's what you need to think about. How do I protect my data? How do I keep it under lock and key? But who should have access to it?
Absolutely.
And frankly, it all starts with a weak password. So using a password manager that's going to generate a long 15-character password and not reusing it is the first step. And then turning on that two-factor authentication, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, the problem is also the password manager can also get compromised. Or what happens if you forget your master password, like my dad did? So there is no one perfect solution out there. The other thing I'll mention as well, do not use public Wi-Fi. For the love of God, do not use it. I mean, that's like having sex with a used condom. You don't know who's been in there. You don't know how you're going to get infected, or what diseases are in there. And the last thing you want is to have anybody get into your devices and compromise them. So,
Matt,
I would add to that.
bring the color.
Yes, I would add to that. I'll never tell a client don't do something. I connect to public Wi-Fi all the time, but I have a VPN and I have measures that protect me in my environments when I do connect to a public Wi-Fi. And so when Matt says don't connect to a public Wi-Fi, he means don't connect without the right security measures on your device, because you could be connected. Let's just say you're in the Delta Lounge. There could be a Delta Lounge 1, a Delta Lounge 2. Delta Lounge 1 could be the verified, authentic Wi-Fi connection. Delta Lounge 2 could be an adversary sitting next to you who set up a hotspot. And when you connect to that and send your data through that, yes, you're connecting through the internet, but that person's what we call a man-in-the-middle attack is filtering your data. And you might be checking your bank account before you're logging, on a flight to some vacation. Hey, let me just check my bank account. Let me transfer some money. Well, you're transferring your money right to an adversary. And you might not know until the plane lands and then you have no money. So it happens that quick.
That's crazy. I'm so sorry. I know Patty had put her hand up a little bit ago. Patty?
Yeah, I have a question, which kind of is personal, but it can travel in there. Is, we purchase everything online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're putting our credit cards on a gazillion different accounts.
Yeah.
And like I had a friend that purchased a pricey coaching program. And then 6 months later or whatever, they zapped her for another $3,500 that she gave them no permission. I mean, it wasn't even in the contract. So then she had to threaten litigation to get the money back. But what I'm saying is when we put these credit cards out there, like our Amazon account, who doesn't have, and it's on file, is there anything we can do to protect somebody else from getting that?
No. So a good measure is to not allow the site to save it. Sometimes we don't get that option. So that would be point one. Point two is to store that credit card information in your password manager, not in your web browser's vault, because somebody could breach the web browser. There's different extensions that sit in there that are malicious. I just found out 2 weeks ago, what was it? A new client of ours, she had a coupon extension. But it was actually a malicious coupon extension. And what that would do is transmit data to whoever the adversary was to collect whatever she's putting in her browser. So it could be her passwords or credit card information, whatever site she's visiting. So we cleaned up her computer and got rid of that. So I would strongly advise, don't store your passwords in the web browser or your credit card information, but then taking it a step further, don't allow sites to retain your credit card information. And be sure, because Patty touched upon this, there must be somewhere in there, maybe there isn't, for automatic renewal. When you sign up for a site, most companies automatically check that box. And if you forget, then they will automatically renew. And then sometimes, depending on the way that contract is written, it's very, very hard to get your money back. And you have to fight.
Let me also add something to what Tom had said. I encourage everybody not just save your credit cards, but don't save anything on your websites. So you always want to put in your information, because at least at that point, nothing is saved on the browser. The other thing I'll mention as well is that they now have digital credit cards. So if you do get compromised, you can change the number and then easily move on. So you also have to make sure that the website you're buying from is legit. For example, if it doesn't say HTTPS, the S stands for secure, it means it is instant secure, and that the information you're transmitting over the internet can be compromised, or like Tom said, which is somebody can intercept it while it's being transferred, hence the man-in-the-middle attack, and then get compromised there. So, you have to, it's almost like walking through like a landmine, and you don't want to get blown up. And so you have to know where to step so you don't have a major problem along the way. And people like Tom and I, especially with Tom, I do more the IT side, can help you with all this process. Say, okay, these are all the weak areas of your system or of your computer, what you're doing. These are ways to protect you. So, we're almost like, like a seatbelt or an airbag. We can't avoid you all the time from getting into the car accident, but at least we can help mitigate the damage of when it does happen, or try to prevent it altogether if possible. So
let me get a raise of hands right now. Who here has mobile security on their phones? So 3 of us.
I'm with Patty. I also don't know. It looks like an unsure.
Yeah, well, my husband's kind of a geek. I don't know what he does, so it's possible.
You would know. And so a more common threat, actually the FBI just released something, although I've been talking about this ever since the start of the pandemic, is QR code scams. If you see a QR code on a parking meter or in public, please don't scan it. Cyber criminals are printing stickers that once you scan it, it leads you to a malicious site. Boom, you're done. But having mobile security will not only prevent you from, just as it did the other day on Facebook, it said malicious site, it will do the same, malicious site, and it will protect you. I would encourage everybody to get mobile security, because mobile security is the #1 way to cause a breach these days, because we're all on our phones. We all have a smartphone, most of us anyway, over 85% of the world's population.
So Tom, that's a really good action item. Is there a particular security that you would advise people to look into for your cell phone?
Yes, the rep. Come talk to me and I will make sure that you're taken care of. We have security partners that we provide the services on behalf of.
The one thing I'll also mention as well is Apple. If you have any Apple devices, they tend to be more patched and less always vulnerable than Android. Android, especially with their marketplace or app store, is like the wild, wild west. So if you're on Android, there are a lot more malicious apps. Google's horrible about, monitoring and checking the apps to make sure that they're not malicious. They're constantly taking down stores from the App Store. So I encourage you, if you're looking for a better solution that's more secure, that Apple actually patches on a regular basis, go for an Apple device, you're less likely, but not totally less likely, or totally 100% less likely to be vulnerable on an Apple device as opposed to a Google device.
Yes, that's absolutely right. However, don't have the false sense of belief that most people do, that Apple devices are more secure. You're just as vulnerable, but the difference is that the way that Androids and Windows machines are built is once something gets in there, it infects the whole machine. Apples aren't built like that. They're built like, if everybody's familiar with the Titanic, in theory, it should have worked with compartments. That's how it's built. And so you have to actually do something in order to infect your Apple device, like click on something or download a malicious app that's leaking your data somewhere else. But, so it's built a little bit differently, but do not have the false sense of hope that Apples will protect you. Yes, they are a little bit more secure, but they are still too vulnerable.
So we're about to wrap up, guys. I'm curious if anybody has any last minute questions, comments, stories, anything they'd like to interject or ask for Tom before we wrap up.
I got 2 questions real quick. Tom, we talked on that little tip sheet. It was talking about insurance, and that was something that I had bought a while back, and I thought I was gravy, right? So got all this coverage. If anything happens, they clean it up, they restore it, they send me the money, like all that was taken care of. Can you just expand just for a minute or two on, like, is that worth having? Is this like a twofold where I need the security, obviously, and then this is a nice thing to have, or is the insurance necessary if you set up the proper things on the front end? Do you still need it? So can you?
Josh, that is an excellent question. I'm actually glad you raised that, because here's the problem. And I don't know your environment and whether you want to talk about your environment, but let's just say you don't have security, or you just have out of the box antivirus solution. That's not protecting your business at all. And let's just say you get a business email compromise. What that means is somebody is imposter, it comes through, malicious link, gets you to click on it, compromise your security. Antivirus protection is not protecting you from that. Now, your insurance company, that's great. You have insurance, you have cyber insurance. They're going to say denied. You've got a big mess to clean up. You have a reputational issue. You've got to hire a PR firm. You've got to hire, an incident response team. Then you have to hire me to come and, give you the right measures. All of that, you see the cost going like this, like this. And then you're like, that's okay. I'm covered. My insurance company, I have a policy, and they're going to be like, nope, because you said that you were protected, and you in your mind, you're like, but I thought I was, because I have antivirus. But you need to have a cybersecurity consultant go through that list and say, wait a second, your business is at high risk. You're in a regulated environment. You need this, this, and this, and this. Or your business is here, and the insurance company is requiring you to have this, that, and the other in order to be compliant with their policy. They're going to say denied. And they're doing that. They're getting real smart, because they're not handing out checks anymore, especially with ransomware, right? They don't want you to pay ransomware, because that just grows the criminal enterprise. So that's a really good question, in that hiring a cybersecurity consultant to help guide you before you even get that policy. But that policy is incredibly important. And I use analogies. I know we got 3 minutes here. I use the rock climbing analogy, because if you're a rock climber, right, and you're scaling the mountain, I don't think anybody's scaling a mountain without the proper equipment. The equipment is the cybersecurity protection. But let's just say there's a net down below to catch you, just in case you're going to fall. I mean, every rock climber is going to fall, right? But the rope is going to keep you hanging on. That's the cybersecurity protection. But what if the rope breaks? There's that net, and that net is the insurance in case you fall, to make sure you don't bottom out.
Gotcha. Insurance, that last resort. Real quick, when we talk about the business side of things and what Rep does and working with the business side, it seems like, our phones, my work emails on my personal phone, and like all of this is kind of intertwined, if that makes sense. When you work with a company like yourself, do they get into the personal and the business? Because it seems like they're almost tied into one, even though technically that's separate, but we walk around with both of our work and our personal lives constantly.
That's right. So what we do is we work with, let's just say, I'm going to use this startup as an example because he's got 20 consultants overseas. What we do is we give the consultants special access to the environment. We restrict that. We also know that they're accessing, on their phones and their personal devices. We can restrict that or prevent them from downloading on their personal devices. So it's really a case-by-case basis. And what I recommend to everybody, if you have work and personal emails, let's just use an iPhone, for example, and you're connected to Apple email. That's great for all your personal emails. Take your work environment out of that. If you have Gmail, download G Suite, the application, and use that for work. If you have Outlook or M365, download the Outlook application. Keep it separate, because the more things that you keep separate, the better you are. But then there's security, the security permissions and access controls that we have to tinker with to make sure that everything is protected, right? Great
questions. So guys, we are at the end of our
It's
time
10
together
o'clock.
today. Tom, incredible job. Thank you so much for all the information,
Yes.
for going through all of this. I really
Anytime.
appreciate you answering the questions in the slideshow and everything that you had today for us. So guys, let's make today an amazing day. We got off on a good start. Let's keep that momentum going. I love you guys. Thank you all so much for your time and energy today. By the way, I'm going to be hosting a completely free webinar Thursday night. It's only 30 minutes on goal setting. If you guys want to drop by, I'll shoot the flyer in the chat. You're more than welcome to stop by. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much. Have an incredible day. And I can't wait to see you again on Tuesday.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Tom.
Right.
Bye, guys.